Now, going back to the current user function, imagine if we have more properties inside this object with more complex types. In that case, it's not going to be convenient to have a big object in front of this function. And to fix this, Typescript has introduced something called interfaces. An interface is also an object, but you can only use it as a reference to a type. This is how we can declare an interface using the interface keyword and then the name of the interface, and I'm going to choose user. And as I said, we're going to create an object but without any equal sign or a colon. You can think of it as a class. Now let's take all of this, the age and the first name, cut it from there, remove the object, remove the colon, and paste them here inside this interface. Let's adjust the code a little bit. You can here use a comma, but also you can use a semicolon, or you can just remove anything from there. But I want to use semicolons because it looks more organized in this way. Now we can use the user interface like any other type. Here add the colon and then the user interface. And if you hover over age, you'll find that the age still have the type string, number, and undefined. Put in mind that interfaces only refer to a type of an object. So if you remove the curly braces from here and just leave the age, you'll get an error saying that string or number is not assignable type user, because user has, first of all, has two properties and user is an object. So let's undo the changes and let's create another function and name it login. This function is going to accept one argument and it's going to have the name login args. It's going to be of type login, and of course we're going to define an interface login. So let me copy this name here, use interface and define the login interface. So in order for a user to log in, he will need an email of type string and a password of type string as well. Actually, I want to have control of the password type while using the login interface inside the login function. To do that, we can change this interface to be generic by adding two angle brackets like this, and then you can think of this interface now as a function that will accept an argument as a type, and we can choose the name of the argument. I'm going to choose pwd for password, and I'm going to assign that type for the password. Now here, if you hover over login, you will find that generic type login requires one type argument. As I said, functions has arguments, so for the generic type, it's the same concept. Now here we can define that argument by adding a angle brackets and add the type of the password inside it as a string. Now inside this function, let's very quick check if the login args.email equals, for example, email, and the login args.password equals, for example, password. In that case, we're going to return true, so the user is authenticated. Now here, else, we're going to return false. We're going to set the type of the return value of this function to Boolean, and this is a new type that we can use and it doesn't need a definition because a boolean is just either a true or false. Now going back to the login interface, we can use another variable that only refers to a type and holds the password type for us. And because the password is not an object, we cannot use the interface keyword. We only can use the type alias. And then name the type to be password type. And then we can add the string to that type. So here, string, and then we can use the password type inside the login interface. If you hover over it, you will find that password type is a string. You can add here either a string or a number, and you can add any type you want, but passwords can only be strings or numbers. We can also use the type alias to add a type to a variable or to a return value of a function. So here, I'm going to add type login result equals boolean, and make sure it's uppercase. And here for the boolean we can use a lowercase or an uppercase. It's the same thing. Let's change this to login result. Now imagine that we have an async function. We're going to use the async keyword to define that. In this case, we got an error saying that the return type of an async function or method must be the global promise generic with the t argument type. And then he says, did you mean to write this generic type? Now, if you know JavaScript, you will know that an async function will return a promise. And this is how we can define a promise type with Typescript. So let's change the login result to be a promise, because this function is going to return a promise. And then the generic or the argument of this generic type represents the real return type of this function, or in another word, the resolved value, or the type of the resolved value. So here we're going to resolve a boolean, and you can see that the error is gone. Now let's say that if we authenticated the user, we will send an object instead of true, and this object will contain a username property set to John again, and another property status set to active. So we have an active user inside our database. Of course, we don't have database here, but just imagine that we have one. Now, of course, we're going to get an error, and to fix that, let's add an interface here and name it member. And inside it, we will have the username property of type string and the status property set to string as well. And here we will get a promise that will resolve either a boolean or a member. So I have made a mistake here. Alright, now the error has disappeared, and we can return either a false or an object. Now about the status property, we can only return three statuses: the active status, inactive status, and the new status. So here you have to always return one of these strings. But imagine if I wrote active like this. In this case, I made a typo, but Typescript didn't say anything, because Typescript doesn't know about these strings. It only cares about the type of the status property being set to string. And as you can see here, I already made a typo. So how we can prevent these type of errors or mistakes? Well, it's very simple. We have to declare an enum type. So here use the enum alias, and then name this enum type member status. And it's going to be an object, but it's not going to refer to an object. I will tell you how we can use it in just a second. Now here we can define these three types by adding active and then inactive and then the new status. Now we have to replace this string here with the member status enum, and for that we have to use member status enum also to select the active status dot active. You can see here that VS Code has the three types here as a suggestions, and this is very helpful to speed up the development process. Now let's choose active, and if you hover over it, you'll find that member status.active equals 0. Now you can refer to the active status as a string by adding equal, then active. Same thing for the inactive. Here string, copy inactive, and for the new also new. Now if you hover over active, you'll find it active equal active as a string. Now inside the member interface, we can only accept one of these properties, so now we will not be afraid from misspelling one of them. Now let's save this file and let's open the terminal and try to compile. We can do that easily by using the tsc command and just hit enter. The tsc command is going to check if we have any errors or any TypeScript errors, and then if everything is okay, we will have a dist folder containing the main.js file. If you open it, you'll find here a lot of code, but all the types from before from the main.js file has disappeared, and we only have pure JavaScript. You can see how Typescript compiled the enum type and did all of this for us. Let's close the main.js file, and now you can say that you learned pretty much everything about Typescript. Before finishing the video, let me very quick show you how you can use the login method. So here, take the login and pass the object with the email, set to email, password to password. And then, because this is an async function, we're going to use then method to get the result, and then we're going to check if the status is active or not. And to do that, we're going to create an if statement and check first if the result is an instance of the class boolean. And by the way, the boolean with the uppercase B is class, and it is a wrapper for the type boolean with the lowercase b. So this type here refers only to a true or false, but the boolean with uppercase b refers to a class that contain the type boolean. So I'm going to do this. If it is an instance of boolean, then return. Otherwise, take the result dot status and check if this status is equal to login or a member status dot active. If so, we're going to return true, or maybe console log user is active. User is active. Now if you want to use boolean with lowercase, change this and you can check for the type of boolean with type of keyword and then result equals to and choose boolean. And if you want to do a check like this with the exclamation mark, you can remove the boolean type from here and replace it with null, and instead of returning false, going to return null. And this is better. And you can see that null also is a type. Now you will find this file attached to this video with other TypeScript resources. So make sure to download them and learn more about TypeScript in your own.